Hello and welcome to Through the Looking Window, brought to you by Open Reflection, where narrative ends, reflection begins, and the path forward becomes a little clearer. I'm your host, Brian Garceau, and I'm thankful that you're here with us this evening. And so tonight,
Brian, it's an honor to be here on the first episode of your podcast.
thank you very much, Jeff. I'm really excited to have you here as well, and we have an interesting topic. Uh, I will say, as a brief introduction, that Jeff is a longtime member of our community. He has served on the board of directors of the Windermere Oaks Water Supply Corporation. We'll be talking about a few aspects of that this evening and probably into the future as well. Hopefully, we'll have him back for some more discussion for that in that area. But tonight, I think, Jeff, we want to look at a compliance order, how we got to that compliance order, what it means to everybody, and your part in it. So maybe we could start by if you could tell us the genesis of this, who was around and what was happening in the community at the time. How did we get to the place where the PUC stepped in, started a conversation that ended up in, I think, a lawsuit, actually, right? And then the parties coming together and negotiating an end to that.
Well, I'll start. I'll start with this. The compliance order that came out January of 2024, which was a 2-year effort on basically my part and other people's in the community who encouraged me to take this path. But let me give you some history on how it all started. It all started when several members of the community came to me and said, "We would like you to run for the water board." And I'm like, "What's that?" I'm like, "Okay." I have served in other, community type organizations,
Mm-hmm.
HOA. I was a president of 600 member at HOA up in the Pittsburgh area for a couple of years. And I've served in other capacities and volunteer boards, whether it was in community service and or in service of particular interests that we
Mm-hmm.
that we had. And I was like, okay, I'm in. I drank the Kool-Aid and put both feet forward and ran for the board because there was an open position. Some of the concerns that the members who encouraged me to run had were what we're going to talk about today. But one of the things was how our elections were run and how they felt that they weren't run as fairly as they could have been, and how we could have done a better job within the water district to hold elections, to make them much more fair to the individuals who ran and the individuals who were on the board and such, and make sure that there wasn't any I don't know, collusion, any other shenanigans going on as far as what was going on there.
Mm-hmm.
So I ran a campaign, got a lot of people behind me on some of my ideas and what I wanted to do,
Mm-hmm.
and supported. Election day comes, and there in the final tally of the votes, I lost that election by basically one vote, and it was like kind of shocking. I was like kind of scratching my head, and I left. I left there and hung my head high. I sent an email out, or I think I posted a statement on Nextdoor congratulating the person who beat me
Mm-hmm.
by the one vote. But then I was like encouraged by some of the members to go out there and let's go take a look at the votes. Let's go see how they were tallied and such. So we scheduled a meeting with at that time the general manager who was running the election, which I thought was very interesting. Do you have the general manager running an election in the community? It should have really been handled by an independent person, independent auditor, somebody who is not related to anybody on the water,
Right.
anybody either on the board associated with the water corporation and all. So we went in there, took a look at, myself and a couple other members went in there, photographed, and it was very open. I mean, the board and the general manager was very, didn't hold anything back, gave us access to all the records, all the votes that were cast, and so on. And one of the votes in particular really struck my fancy because it was double marked.
Hmm.
It was checked for me, and it was checked for my opponent.
Mhm.
And then there was a handwritten note, and I couldn't validate who it was written by and who wrote it. It was written. There was a handwritten note and signature, and said, "I voted for this person," with an arrow going to it.
Hmm.
And in my view, as a citizen who's voted, in, I don't know, it'd be 50, I'm showing my age, 53 elections.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. 53 federal and mostly state, because I'm one of those guys that does,
Mhm.
vote and participate.
Yeah.
I just thought that there was something wrong with that, and I challenged that. I challenged that ballot because that would have made us a tie. To be honest with you, that was
So
a
it was
tie.
by
There were
one
some other,
vote that swung it
yeah,
one way or the
yeah.
other. Yeah.
There were some other votes that were cast that at that time were allowed through this provisional voting, meaning that they weren't fully vetted. The individual who made the vote, or casted the vote, wasn't fully vetted. Were they a member of the water community? Were they allowed to vote?
Hmm.
And it was at the discretion of the board if they were going to allow those votes to be tallied to that particular individual.
Mhm.
But in my opinion, it was by one vote. I think the record reflects that as well. I don't have that official election results in front of me.
Mhm.
So we were like, and then there were some other ambiguities with the voting roster and these provisional votes, and why weren't they counted, and such as that. And we felt, actually, with the provisional votes, that I actually won by 3 or 4 votes.
Mhm.
But that's not the way it turned out. I congratulated my opponent, like I said,
Mhm.
and I went on with my life. But at the same time, something stuck in my head to say this wasn't right, and I was getting some feedback from the community, and said, let's take this to the next level. So what we did is, the first thing I needed to do in order to challenge it, I needed to file a lawsuit within the Burnett County, which I did. And the funny thing about it, as a matter of fact, and I have the document here, and I can display it
Mhm.
if you can see it. You may not be able to
Sure.
read it, but this document came to me about 3 weeks ago, and it is a dismissal from the Burnett County court clerk, that they want to dismiss this case, and they plan to dismiss it as of tomorrow.
So you
So
have a dismissal now. I thought you were going to say you're going to hold up the docket itself, but no, this is the
yeah,
dismissal.
well, it is the docket. It's a notice that a notice of dismissal docket is really what it's called,
Mhm.
and it's because it's been, well, almost 2 years since I filed that case.
Right.
Um, the address that they had on this was old. It wasn't even my home address. I had since moved here, so it's well over 2 to 3, but well over, as a matter of fact, well over 4 years old. This case that I had filed.
Mhm.
So it was lengthy, but it's interesting that it took that long to get it through the court system on a civil case.
Oh.
Because me just getting this notice, several weeks ago, was interesting.
So
But
this is
anyways,
Burnett
so
County,
we
and they're that hung up with cases, and it took two
Slowly.
years.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
civil case. It's
Yeah.
is it really pressing?
Probably
Probably
not for
not. I don't know
them. No.
why it took so long, but
Mhm.
it took that long, and tomorrow it will be just officially dismissed. It
Hmm.
is Jeff Walker, versus the Windermere Oaks Water Supply Corporation, and it
Right.
was regarding the election. The election, primarily the election procedures and how it went about, and primarily these votes that we found.
Mhm.
Um, but then I took another route. I had another member, Mark Carpenter, who's currently serving on the board. Him and I scheduled a meeting with then the current president of the board, the vice president of the board, or maybe the secretary treasurer at the time. I can't remember exactly what his official capacity was on the board, and our attorney from the Lloyd Gossett Group. we had it scheduled, and Mark Carpenter and I went down and had a meeting with them,
Hmm.
and I had all this data sitting in a binder. I had this vote that we took a copy of that was double marked. I had these provisional votes. I had records from which I took during our initial review. These records that I took of voter list, who was eligible and who was not, the inconsistency in those lists, and so on. And I presented it to then the current two of the current board members and our corporate attorney, and it was like deer in the headlights.
Hmm.
They were like, "Okay, so," and I said, you know, right there with the double ballot, that should have been that vote should have been thrown out, regardless if that person had come in and pleaded to say, "Oh no, that was me, I did that," and so on. That's just no election would allow that.
Hmm.
That wouldn't be allowed at the federal level, state level, county level, any level would if you had a double mark vote. That vote
Okay.
would have been thrown out. But they didn't want to hear about it. Which kind of irritated us again. Like, well, what kind of shenanigans you guys pulling here? So um, that triggered my next event, which would be to file a complaint within the PUC.
Hmm.
The PUC likes to hear about these things. Is there election? How fair are the elections going on? Especially at the time of with Windermere having another lawsuit, or I shouldn't say lawsuit, but having another review happening within the PUC in regards to our rate appeal.
Hmm.
So there was already information within the PUC about elections, how elections were held prior to this, and some of the shenanigans that were going on that were kind of highlighted. I shouldn't say highlighted, but identified in the rate appeal case. So the PUC was aware of it,
Hmm.
that we had some issues. Um, they took a look at they took a look at our stuff, and they actually, at first rejected it, but then it was picked up. And I may not have all the facts, so if somebody reviews this, they're going to go, "Oh, Walker, that's not true." But it 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 ended up turning into the compliance filing that you're talking about today.
Right. Right.
So we got some coverage within within the PUC, and the PUC came back and wanted some more documentation, and uh, several of the members took that as an opening to say, well, let's not just look at election procedures because they were flawed.
Hmm.
We could have been doing a better job. We could have had an independent auditor look at this. Should not have had the general manager carrying around boxes of ballots. You know, there was an instance that I brought up in regards to this, which I think is pretty prevalent to this case. I live in the airport, which is a gated community.
Hmm.
There's people who are eligible to vote for their board member in the water company. Well, this is a gated community, and so is the Windermere Oaks community. That's gated.
Hmm.
Well, I cannot get to the Windermere Oaks community through the back gate unless I'm provided a card, a code,
Hmm.
because I don't live in that community. So I
And
respect,
that's
I
where the
respect their
ballot box
boundaries.
is. It's in the Windermere
Yes,
Oaks
that was where
community.
the ballot box was.
There you go.
Exactly, Brian.
Yep.
Good point. So if
Right
I
across the
wanted to
street from me.
yeah, if I want exactly. So if I wanted to go, put my ballot in the ballot box, I couldn't. And I'm like, why don't you have one at the airport?
Hmm.
This is, we're part of the water community and such. So I brought that up, and of course, it went nowhere, which I thought was kind of, okay, kind of a little bit of BS. But anyways, so we trugged on, and one of the members, the current Windermere Oaks Water Supply Corporation's current president of the board as of today, took not control of this, but wrote a very comprehensive, very detailed document to
Hmm.
submit to the PUC.
Right.
And this not only had the flaws within the corporation of election procedures, but some of the other challenges that the corporation faced, such as our records management system was terrible. We didn't have specific email addresses that were capturing emails, email attachments, and record retention like you would find in any corporation. We just
Hmm.
didn't have that. I found that to be, very, very bad, and an easy thing to fix with the right people, tools, and capital to put forth on that. There was other things. Our bylaws needed to be updated, not
Hmm.
completely rewritten, but updated. They hadn't been updated for a while. There was some, things that, needed to be changed to benefit members, benefit the board, and benefit the corporation.
Right, right.
And there were other facets within our, the election procedures needed to be updated and such, and
Hmm.
how we did rate reviews and such. So we basically took everything in the kitchen and threw it at them, and they listened. The PUC did listen to our arguments, listen to what we had to say, and I think that influenced them in parallel with what was going on with the rate order that was going through their process as well. The challenges to the rates that were
Right,
increased in the early
right.
2000s. So there was some parallelness there. Well, lo and behold, this thing sat dormant for almost 8 to 10 months. Didn't know what was going on with it, if it went anywhere, and sure enough, it was picked up. And all 4 or 5 of these avenues that I just described
Hmm.
were picked up, and they were put into a package that the PUC was going to implement and put forth as part of a compliance filing that they wanted Windermere to adhere to.
Right,
And my name was all over it, even though I was only responsible for really bringing forth the election problem
right.
and such. Um, 2 years into that whole issue, I finally won the next election, was elected to the board, and within 9 months of being elected on the board, the compliance order made it through the PUC and was ready for signature or acceptance by the Windermere Oaks Water Supply Corporation.
Hmm.
And we accepted it. I was definitely the one who signed it because I thought it was very, very good things that we needed to work on. What I didn't really understand, and maybe I should have spent some time, was how complex it was to get those items done. We had already been working on, let's say, the election procedures in the previous year. One of the other board members took the reins on this one and went with it, rewrote a lot of the procedures on his own, brought forth some of the ideas that we heard from the community that we wanted to do inside, such as bringing on an independent auditor. Our elections now are handled by an outside third party, which is appropriate.
Right.
There are timelines for the election. There are safeguards on the ballot, so it can't be forged, so it can't be, submitted. There was a lot of things that were put forth from that board member who wrote those election procedures in 2023. And then we tested them. We actually put them through 3 iterations or really 4 iterations of election cycle. The first one was in 2023 when I was elected. It was run by an independent auditor. We found some things that we wanted to do better at, and we incorporated those into a couple other elections in late 2023, which again proved the methods and means and procedures on this document, and then we used it in the annual elections of 2024 for a couple
Hmm.
other board members, and it really streamlined a lot of it. It brought out it canceled a lot of the animosity and questioning about who's running the election. Again, third party driven. So we had it down.
Yeah, I have to
I
say
actually
there
served
were
on.
at
Go
least
ahead.
2 cycles that we went through, I think, and
There was actually four. There
4.
was actually four. There was the annual election in 2023. They were finally tested.
Yep.
Initial rollout, and then we had the 2020, the 2023 removal elections
Hmm.
in late 2023, and then the annual election in 2024.
Right. And so I was going to say the
Yep.
consensus of the people involved, that is the members, it seemed to be a fairly calm operation that people could,
Yeah.
where they could depend on the results. So it seemed to be
Yeah.
successful. So the new
Yes.
rules seem to be working.
Yeah, absolutely. And kudos to the at that time the board member and member who took the lead on that, Renee French, and I think he did a great job. He had a
Yeah.
lot of safeguards in it. he reviewed each of the elections. What can we do better? He talked to the independent auditor, and talked to them and said, what can we do better for you, for counting, for ballot validation, and such. And I think it was what was a good start. Well, that was part of the compliance filing that came down in 2024, in
Right.
January of 2024. But one thing that really struck me is, the timelines that they were asking to get all this work done. And it was a lot. My intent, like, let's say on the bylaws, was never to say, oh, let's just take a USDA bylaw and let's incorporate it. I think we needed to make it unique to our neighborhood, to our environment, to the airport people, to the residents over there. So my thing would have been, hey, let's form a committee and let's let them go off, rewrite the bylaws, and bring it back,
Mhm.
and actually get the members involved in assisting in the rewrite of our bylaws and our updates, and make sure it's handled from a committee standpoint,
Right.
versus just a couple of individuals sitting on the board. We needed to be part of the records management piece. I mean, that would take some capital to do, because it would be an enhancement to our website. We would need to have a database service provider out there that would
Mhm.
be able to store all of our records that were secured. These are such things as invoices coming in. These are just basic correspondence between board members, between members and boards, between whoever wanted it. So that would take some doing. Our the current website just didn't have that capability as of yet and needed to be enhanced. But in order to do that, it was going to take some money to do that. So this compliance order came down, and I just didn't realize the complexity of it. When I signed off on it and the deadlines, we were like, "Oh yeah, we have 6 months to get all this done." Yeah, we'll get it done. Not a big deal.
Mhm.
And I was so naive at that. I'm the guilty party of that. We did get one of them done, and I sent it off to our new legal team to file with the PUC in late May. That was our election procedures. Something happened why that didn't take place, but that would have been a good start. We could have rolled out of the gate real quick with, "Hey, we've got one of your compliance pillars completed. Here it is. Take a look at it. Give us your comments back." And for some odd reason, it just didn't happen. Somewhere it dropped the ball in May, June of 2024.
Right.
But that would have been a good start. At the same time, in 2024, there was definitely board chaos. Several of the board members left, and it was relied on a very simple 1, 2, and 3 member board, just trying to keep everything going. And the compliance, requirements kind of fell to the wayside.
Mhm.
And I'll take ownership for my part in that when I was on the board, but it was just, there was so much on our plate to do. Also in 2024, in the first quarter, not only did we have the compliance filing come down, but shortly thereafter, the official rate order came down, which, brought a big, huge reduction in our rate, but also offered, significant refunds to our membership for past payments they had made to us, which, made the corporation really cash strapped.
Right.
Each month we were, as you've seen from some of the financials, each month we were losing, between 8 to 10 to $12,000 a month. My focus at that time was definitely not on the compliance filing or the compliance order, but was more on keeping keeping the plan operational, keep our partners who worked with us in good graces with us. These are our operators, our legal team, our accounting, and make sure we're providing clean water, which is what we did. And we did it with bootstrap money and hard to do, but at the same time what suffered was the compliance order.
Right. Right.
And shame on us that we just couldn't get it all done. We were limited in capabilities from the board standpoint, but just limited in resources. Are you going to spend money on maybe a website to enhance your records management system when you're losing $10 to $12,000 a month? and you're trying to keep the lights on and the water cleaned and so on and so on.
Sure, sure.
So we missed a lot of those compliance, deadlines for sure. And was the PUC happy about it? No. But one of the things that I know I preached and said, do any of these compliance requirements that they're looking for impact water quality? No. Do they
Mhm.
enhance the operation of the corporation? Yes, and make us do things better and such, and adhere to some of the new challenges that we faced out there. But they did nothing as far as impacting water quality, which is where my focus was.
Right, right.
And I wanted to stay true and focused on that. We were trying to One of the requirements was doing a 2023 audit. And the internal groups struggled. This would be board members and people that were on our staff at the time, struggled to provide the accounting and audit teams the necessary records that they needed to complete a 2023 audit. So not only were we hampered with a money crunch, we were hampered with a records retention crunch and trying to get them the necessary information they wanted
Mhm.
in order to complete an audit in a given year, which was part of the compliance filing that was put forth by the PUC.
Right.
Again, unaware of how difficult this would be when we first got into this whole thing, I would have definitely taken a different route in working with the PUC on this compliance filing.
Yeah, it's understandable where your focus was, but you get a hold of this compliance document, and you've got 6 months to do it. How
Yeah.
how were your thoughts organized at the time? How did you plan to, when you got to look at it? I mean, you saw it in development, and then you finally got to sign
Yep.
it, and it has a big pile of things on there. In addition to the one issue that you mentioned that was the genesis of all of this, how did you go about organizing the work? And I know the answer, so I'm going to let you talk a little bit, and then I'm going to give a little bit of a response too. Go ahead.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. Well, first off, as soon as when it was being developed, it was like, oh, this should be super easy. We'll get a group of members because they've sat in meetings and they want the bylaws updated and changed and enhanced and so on. We'll get a group of people and they'll take that project over and we'll get it back and we'll review it as a board and then we'll review it as a community and accept this and kumbaya. Well, that didn't happen. It just didn't happen.
Right.
I looked at the records retention and go, yeah, there's a record retention policy that you can find, on the internet for corporations like ours. And we just had to submit it. But that's not what we really wanted to do. What we really had was we had a storeroom full of old records that were poorly filed. And I had our billing clerk just try to look into it, try to go through it. It was just a lot. It was
Mhm.
just a lot of chaos. And again, we just didn't have any resources to go and start to put those paper documents in a logical order. And and the same thing was with our electronic order. We get an invoice in. Where is it being stored? It's being stored on somebody's hard drive, but not in a central repository, which is where it needed to be stored.
Mhm.
How is it tied to somebody's email? Because we were getting PIA requests that says, hey, you sent this email to this particular person with this attachment. Can you go back and get it? And all of our emails were either set up through a Gmail account personally, and there was no retention.
Right.
You needed somebody to take that operation who understood those back end, what is required and such, and try to put together a proposal. And that would not only take somebody's individual resource, but it would probably take a consultant or some money in order to do that.
Sure.
And I saw the writing on the wall as soon as that order came down in the 1st of January. I mean, we had a sample of what the order was going to be on December 13th of
Mhm.
2023. The final order didn't come out for 3 months after that till March 21st of 2024. But we knew the guts of it, and we knew how much revenue we were going to bring in, and it was not much.
Right.
And I even made a prediction to PUC staff on May 18th that, hey, if we don't do something with our rates or this, we're going to be bankrupt, or we're going to be, in receivership in 6 months. And, we'll tell more about that story later. But
Yeah.
my focus was not so much on the compliance filing. I did try to focus. I said, oh, we got one ready to go. That was the election procedures. But for some odd reason, we sent it up to the legal team and it didn't get published. No, it fault on me that I didn't follow up with it. But, those things happen. And I should have double checked everything. But I knew that you needed help, with in getting these things done, and there was, very limited community involvement in stepping up to the plate, especially
Yeah.
around the bylaws.
So
People
here's
were
where
like, "Well,
I'll,
let's just use the USDA ones, and we'll enhance them." And
yeah.
was that the right direction? I didn't know. I don't know too much about that. Was that the right direction or the wrong direction? We needed some assistance on that.
Right.
So,
So I'll jump in
yeah,
here. One of the things
sure.
I wanted to do was share a, this is a worksheet that you had input to because I was trying to understand exactly what happened with the board over time, the churn,
Yeah,
as I call it, involved here. Hopefully, you can see it all
yeah,
right. But what I'm trying to point out here is that the bylaws and maybe even TOMA that makes certain expectations of a corporation such as ours. They expect you're going to have a full board. They expect you're going to
yeah,
have committees that are standing committees
yes,
and such. And I had to learn from reading Toma my part as a board member, what type of conversations I could and could not have with other
yeah,
board members. There's extreme limitations placed on those types of conversations coming from, now looking like another 3 years is going to be 50 years in IT and teleco. I mean, all we do most of the time is try to do work more efficiently, get more done in less time. To run into the rules of the TOMA and try to live within those rules has been very difficult for me. So, but I also point out it's very difficult for this corporation and any other corporation living under the Texas Open Meeting Act and PUC directives and such. And so when you look at this board history, even if you have 5 board members, there's still a lot of work to do. And the board
yes,
members cannot converse amongst each other, at least to the point where there are decisions being made. So you can't do the work at the board level. The expectation of the Texas Open Meeting Act and our bylaws is that all of the work gets done by committees. And so you may recall a long time ago there was a standing argument within certain members of the community that we should not have a water corporation. We cannot run, are not capable of running a water corporation. I agreed at the time, but for a different reason. They believed that was the case because the people that were doing it were incompetent or corrupt or both. I looked across the community. I know that there are people that are capable of doing the work. There's an awful lot of horsepower where it regards talent and time, frankly, among some of them. But when
yes,
the problem I had, my argument for saying you can't do it is because you can't do it in this community, and you can't do it in this community because a small group of people have bullied, essentially, and I'll use the term exactly and frankly like that, bullied the rest of the membership such and threatened them either straight on or by inflection, threatened them in such a way that nobody wants to volunteer even to serve on a committee because they feel threatened. And so again, the the problem I think that you faced, whether you realized it or not at the time, I think when you signed the document, you pretty much had compliant people to work with. But over time, that changed, and your ability to get stuff done through committees was basically stopped, paused. You couldn't do it.
right. Yeah. That's pretty much that's pretty much in a nutshell. So
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. I've never seen anything like it in my life, and this is just one aspect of stuff that I hope to talk to you and others about over time as we get others to join this podcast. We're at almost 40 minutes now, Jeff. Let's
okay,
see if we can conclude things here.
sure.
I think we've talked
And sorry to
about.
take up so much history on it, but
No,
you
it's
know, you have to
good. No,
understand
it's
the history to
excellent.
get there. Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
I mean, I've really enjoyed it. When you get to see the podcast, you'll see it's all sorts of crazy stuff going on as I'm trying to figure out how to be an engineer and a host at the same time. I will get it because
Understood.
it can be done, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
it's been fun, and I've messed some stuff up for sure. We'll see. But in conclusion here, and again, we can do a part two of this if it makes sense. Let's think about it for a while. What do you see the way forward here as far as a compliance document? Because, I don't, I mean, I had part of that, right? And I will say
Yep.
that, I joined the board in a very strange way, and we'll talk about that in the future as well. But it took me, I think, 3 solid months before I started to get some traction and be able to do some work that was of a benefit to the members and the corporation. And I
Yep.
think partly it could have been a matter of trust. I mean, nobody on the board really knew me that well. And you just, in the community that we're in, it's unfortunate to say, you don't know. You don't know what people's motives are until you go through several cycles of different work efforts, and then find that the person is, yeah, he's trustworthy, yeah, he's loyal, and he wants to make this corporation work, etc.
Hmm.
But I did the Schedule D. That was something. The unfortunate thing about the
Hmm.
Schedule D was
That was a lot.
I did it all. I worked with all those people to get it done. I submitted it, and I don't think it ever got to the PUC on time, although it was
Right.
submitted to whoever on time. It's just one of those crazy things where
Yeah.
you have a skeleton crew and you believe something's going to happen, and you got to follow up every time. I didn't follow up. I thought people would follow through, and it didn't happen. So, but anyway,
Hey, that's
it's
the same
just
thing
an
that happened to me
example.
with the, yeah, with the election procedures.
Right,
I
right.
was the
Yeah,
same
go
way.
ahead. I've talked a
Guilty.
lot there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, that's fine. It was the same thing with the election procedures. But yeah, I know you had a time frame on this, and there's some more of my thoughts on this whole compliance filing. I think it's necessary to complete. I think we do need a rewrite or an enhancement of, I don't want to rewrite, wrong choice of word. I think we need our bylaws to be enhanced. I think there's some areas that need to be tightened up for, to ambiguity. And I think our records management system just needs to be updated and such, because we just waste so much time and dialogue back and forth when we get PIA requests or just
Right, right.
satisfying inquisitive minds.
You can't
Yeah.
find
And
stuff. Yeah.
those would be too. Yeah.
So
And like any corporation that you have out there, that's one of their big focus, because it keeps them out of lawsuits, it keeps them out of, hot water.
no, it
So
totally makes
I'm sorry.
sense. So I guess my earlier question, just to complete the thought there and get your response, we have a new board. Uh,
Hmm.
you, me, and Scott Miller, our compadre, were able to gracefully exit at, I think, a good time, all things considered. The new board has been seated. They're, I guess, partially seated. There's some others coming in around the time when we have our next annual meeting. And so, as we mentioned, I think some of this compliance has not been completed. What is the responsibility of this new board where it regards the remaining items?
Well, I think there's been a timeline established, by the temporary manager when they came in November. They wanted to reset some of the expectations and some of the timelines. I'd have to dig back into my documents and look at that, look what was offered by the PUC. But I don't think it's just, hey, let's rush out there and satisfy a compliant.
Right.
That's what I think. If we take that approach, I think we're hurting ourselves long term. I think there's very competent people that are on the board, um, and they're very dedicated. Several of them are really, really dedicated. but I don't think we should take this lightly. In my view, the PUCs, this is a compliance issue. They're not going to come shut us down. They're not going to take us over. You have the capability of going to them and saying, "Hey," which was our fault. We should have gone to them and said, "We're not focused on compliance filings. We're focused on producing clean water and keeping this corporation going because we're losing $10,000 to $12,000 a month."
Mhm.
I mean, come on. I mean, the PUC, if we were to take that to the people in there, they would understand and go, "Oh, yeah, we get that.
Mhm.
Keep it going. Keep clean water because that's what it needs to do." And keep trying to get through these things as best as you can until we find an adequate revenue stream, which would allow us to do some of these things,
Right.
because it was costing us money, like the 2023 audit. That cost money. We just didn't have it. I mean,
Yeah, and it's
we
not
just
done yet
did not
either,
have
right?
it to pay
Yeah.
for it. Everybody thought, "Oh, we got to get it done. Let's go get it done." And I'm like, guys, it's going to cost us $5,000 to $10,000. We don't have it.
Well, not only
We
that,
just don't
Jeff,
have
the
it.
time frame, according to this document, to do it is just totally inaccurate,
Yeah.
inadequate.
Well, if we had our records in order, it
That's
might have been a
true.
lot better.
That's
I
true.
mean, but as soon as you jump into it and go, "You don't have that. We don't have a clean file on that. You don't have a clean file with that. You can't find those records." We were like shocked when
Right.
we switched. And this is where I'd like to continue in our next session. When we switched our CPA, our bookkeepers, from one to another,
Mhm.
that was a terrible handoff.
Mm.
Terrible. Did we get clean data? And the data that we got, how accurate was it?
I
How
think the
accurate
PUC
was
has an
the data?
opinion about its
We just don't
accuracy.
know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were, I mean, that's what I'm saying. I was
Mhm.
guilty of it with this compliance going, "Oh, it's going to be easy to do these 5 pillars,
Right.
blah, blah,
Right.
blah." And it really wasn't,
Yeah.
because I didn't understand how the back end was just not there. It
Yep.
just wasn't there,
Yep.
and such. But more to follow on this topic.
I hope so.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the compliance filing led to a couple other things that has happened to the water corporation, because this was just one of them. But it's not that we didn't put forth the effort as best as we could and the resources we had. Like you say, Brian, you spent what, 2 to 3 months on that Schedule D
Mm.
filing that was required. And it wasn't that you didn't dedicate your time as a volunteer board member to get it done. It's just the data wasn't available to us. And how accurate was the data? We're going to submit something in a government document to the PUC. We want to get it pretty accurate, in my view.
If you
I know
can.
you did. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Get what you
And
can.
everybody was scrambling just to get that done.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
you figure that was an easy piece. Oh yeah, I can find all these records. They just weren't there.
Yeah. It
They
was
just weren't
a
there.
fill in the blank docket,
Yeah,
make a
yeah.
bureaucrat
But it was fill in
happy.
the
And
blank. But it was, what do you fill it in with? We
yeah.
knew what to fill it in with, but where is that data that we need to
Yeah.
fill it in?
Yeah. The challenge was
Yeah.
matching it up to the people that had the info. You're absolutely right.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So,
Okay.
but back to your question. Yeah, I think it's important that we look at these things, but not just haphazardly, like, "Oh, we're going to vote on a new records management policy."
Right.
I'd like to see it. As a member, I'd like to see what it is and make sure we stay out of hot water in the years to come.
Mhm.
These boards are going to turn over. People are going to come and go, and you want a nice transition where you can
Right.
follow up
Right.
and understand records.
Yeah. So they
Yeah.
can be
So
successful. We need them to be successful.
exactly,
Everybody wants them to
exactly.
be successful.
There you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Okay. All right.
So
Well, with that, Jeff, I really enjoyed talking to you. We have to do it again.
yes,
You've already
yeah, please
mentioned
do.
a couple of people and a couple of topics. This is going to blossom. There's no doubt about it.
Good. Good.
I really look forward to talking to you again and to other people as well. And with that,
Yep.
I'll say thank you and good
Let me
night,
know.
and we'll run the music.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.